Welcome back for another week of the Jeff Tate Sports Podcast. Episode 66 here on Monday, June 22nd. Hopefully all of you guys had a great weekend. There's a lot of sports to watch. Believe me, I watched a lot of them. Apologies for not having a podcast last Friday. Once again, the summer lack of sports content has kind of gotten to me in certain days. I golfed, had a good time. My friends and I, big 2-on-2 basketball tournament. If you remember back in, I believe, April, we had a 2-on-2 tournament. Well, we had another one Friday, and I am proud to say me and my friend Landon took the championship. Clutch three-point shooting performances from both of us. Had a lot of fun. The MVP of that tournament goes to Landon. Unconscious in a few games. The championship game, I carried him a little bit. 5 threes, just big game, Landon MVP, blast. Please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. Big thing I've been pushing the last few weeks, as you've definitely probably heard. Please visit thejtpodcast.com. It is a WordPress website that I've put a lot of time and effort into, and it can also be a great tool for you when you are interested in the podcast, when you want to find a previous episode, a lot of that good stuff. You can find all of it on the website, and you can go from there, and you bookmark the website, and every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you check it. You're good. You'll have the latest episode, and you can see previous episodes back to about 10 episodes ago. But if you also want to find a place for those episodes that might have been the first few episodes, you can click on a link on the website and it'll take you directly to the podcast feed. Also on the Twitter page, and this is really cool, the pinned tweet, which is, if you simply go to my profile, the top tweet is a link, and it's called Chartable Smart Links. I've been working with them. You click on this, and it will give you all 7 places that my podcast is currently at, and it will, all you have to do is tap the one you want. So the 7 are Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Castbox, Radio Public, Stitcher, and you click it and it takes you directly to my feed on their website or in their app, which is very convenient. I have mentioned to you guys that July and August, I have a lot of fun plans for NFL and college football previews with my friend Cole, and we're kind of in the final stages of preparing this. We're looking at starting in 2 weeks with 2 podcasts a week with Cole. We're gonna the first few in July are gonna be college football previews. We're gonna do the Big 5 conferences: ACC, Big 12, Big 10, SEC, Pac-12, and then we have a very interesting podcast episode that will be about 20 minutes, and it will be a hypothetical question, and we will be gauging top 10 coaches in college football and why. And I'm not going to spoil much more because it is going to be, I think, one of my best episodes, and Cole and I should have a lot of fun with this. Then, beginning of August, we're going to go into the previewing of the NFL divisions, kind of where we think those divisions look like, who the favorites are in those divisions, and a lot of stuff like that. And the final podcast with Cole this summer will be all the divisional picks. And I don't know if you remember when Cole was on the podcast with me to do the Los Angeles Chargers and Detroit Lions draft breakdown, he talked a lot about how he will have some surprising picks, and I've heard some of them, and they are very bold. So we will have a lot of fun with that. I will also plan on doing some polls around that time more. I'm looking at utilizing the Twitter polls a lot more to get you guys engaged. So to the podcast today, and there was a lot of sports this past weekend. You had the RBC Heritage Golf Tournament, which was won by Webb Simpson last night. Some pretty big showings from some big golfers: Brooks Koepka, Justin Thomas, Daniel Berger, who won last week, is a kind of emerging as a real threat to the top guys on the PGA Tour. We had the Premier League fully return in terms of every team played over the weekend. My team, Chelsea, won yesterday 2-1 against Aston Villa, and Christian Pulisic, United States superstar soccer player, Had it the first goal for Chelsea since the restart. Came on 59th minute, scored within 5 minutes. He is such a fun player to watch and is really exciting for the future of the United States soccer team. Now, there also were some kind of sad things that are kind of concerning, but maybe might not be as concerning going into the year. College football has had some difficult developments over the past week. The University of Clemson has had a total of 23 players test positive for the coronavirus. The University of UCLA had some very interesting things. The players want a outside government mandated team to kind of help administer the coronavirus tests, the coronavirus protocols, because they don't trust head coach Chip Kelly to do all that, which that's a little concerning going into the year, that the players don't trust their coach to administer those protocols. You have schools like the University of Texas. A lot of athletes have been reported to test positive. And there's two ways to look at this, in my opinion. The first way is the positive to it. You knew people were going to get tested and positive tests were going to come back. That's kind of inevitable with the infection rate of this disease. Some people are going to get it. Not a lot, but people are going to get the virus. Well, how do you deal with it? And a lot of these teams have their own protocols in terms of they are quarantining these players that test positive for 14 days, testing people that were around them, and going from there. And that is the protocol. That's what you got to do. I look at it somewhat as a positive because a lot of these athletes don't necessarily have the best health care. They're young. They're young athletes, and when they're on these campuses, they're the most protected they're going to be. And I truly don't believe these universities would put these athletes in harm just to get a product out on the field. The reason I say that is lawsuits are huge right now. Like, you don't even know what the legal ramifications are of the coronavirus, because if a player tests positive and somehow happens to die, what does that family sue the school because he was on campus? A lot of stuff like that. And I think the school is going to do everything in their power to get the safest protocols for their athletes. And yes, they want a sports season, but if it comes at the risk of losing players and lawsuits, they're not going to do it. They'd be very dumb to do that, because the main reason the NCAA tournament was canceled is because you can't run the risk of players not being safe when they're with their selective school. You don't want to run into the issue of lawsuits. It all makes perfect sense. It's tough as a sports fan to see. Now, the downside to this is Laura Rutledge is a very good college football reporter. She works with ESPN, and she says there is a growing concern this morning on Get Up from the players about what the schools can do to protect them. And I think it's fair. There is so much unknown with this virus. There's so much unknown with how we're going to handle the virus, that it's fair for some players to be optimistic, but also be concerned. There's been a very indefinite amount of people that have come out and said, well, we believe these protocols will allow us to play a season, which is great. But there also is going to be players that are concerned, mainly parents of these players. There's kind of a parent coalition gathering that is talking a lot about what we're going to do to counteract this, because it doesn't look good. There's a lot of issues with the virus and how these schools are going to protect our student sons and daughters that are going to the school to play a sport. It's tough, and I don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of no one. If you say you know what's going to happen, I'm sorry, you don't. Like, you're lying to yourself, because it is so hard for people to know what is actually going on. So when I come back from this quick break, I want to kind of finish up on college football talk for next year and go into a little bit of MLB and NBA real quick. But first, I have my On This Day in Sports History, and you will get it in about 1 minute. Actually, you won't get it in 1 minute because I took a break for a minute, but it doesn't look like that on the podcast. So 1994 on June 22nd, I was talking about the United States national team a little bit earlier, Christian Pulisic. Well, on this day in 1994, they beat Colombia 2-1 in a round play match at the World Cup in Pasadena, California. And it was their first World Cup win since 1950. And for those of you that follow the United States soccer team, we don't do the best on the national scale. We don't even sometimes do the best in our region, like the North America and Central America region that we have to qualify in. Well, this day was different. Colombia was considered an up-and-coming team, one of the favorites actually to win the World Cup. And some notable players from this American men's national team that you fans might have heard of. Alexi Lawless. He is a Fox Sports soccer commentator. Everyone knows him. Brad Friedel, very good goalkeeper that actually just wrapped up his career a few years ago. Kobe Jones, very good midfielder. Probably one of the better midfielders at the time, and it was really cool to see him be an American. And then another guy, Eric Winaldo, who's a current coach. He's a forward, extremely good soccer player, and it's very fascinating just to see that they beat a Colombia team that was a powerhouse at the time, and even now is a very, very good soccer team that I wouldn't say United States would be a favorite against in any way. So now back to the content for this episode in terms of what we were talking about. And with college football, the timeline's going to come out soon. By the end of July, they're going to have a decision if there's going to be a college football season because logistically you have a lot to figure out if that's the case, how road trips look, how it looks to practice, all that stuff, how you're going to look at your practices because your practices and how those students go in terms of interacting with their school. Like, what is the school's procedure for coronavirus? Are they going to go all online? Are there going to be in-person classes? All of that good stuff. I apologize for my cat. I don't know what he's doing. But to transition now, it needs to be a decision, hopefully sooner rather than later. So the NBA, now transitioning to my final point of the day, the NBA has had some interesting developments over the past week as well. The state of Florida is seeing coronavirus cases spike at an alarming rate, almost 4,000 on Friday. And that's kind of an issue for the NBA because that is where they're playing in Orlando. And yes, the players are in a bubble format, but workers that are in the bubble are not going to be bubbled into that, quote, bubble. They are allowed to go home at night. They are allowed to interact with other people outside of the bubble, unlike the players that are in the NBA that are in the, quote, bubble. And Adam Silver came out this weekend and said he's still very confident that the NBA will be able to resume the season July 30th, but they need to figure out with Disney, with basically anyone involved in the bubble, how they're going to manage people leaving and coming into the bubble because it's pretty simple, honestly. You have all these people coming in and out of the bubble. Well, that's going to increase the infection rate or the chances of a player getting infected. And that's not what you want to see. You don't want that to happen, especially when the big part of the NBA coming back to Orlando was it is the safest environment for all the players, coaches, and team members involved, and the players and coaches' families. How do you do that? I don't know. All this stuff you hear, and I listen to tons of podcasts weekly. No one knows. Like, people can give their best thoughts on what are going to happen, but no one actually knows. It's impossible to know because this is just such an unprecedented time. We've never had something like this, especially in this age of social media. People go out there and say, oh, well, a vaccine is developed. Well, no, it's not. It's just people saying what they think will get them the most likes, the most retweets. Just fascinating that social media has probably heightened this disease more than it actually is. Yes, this disease is a big deal, and yes, this disease has killed many people, but social media has made it, I would say, 10 times worse. And that's not a knock on the disease, it's just saying social media elevates things to another level. Now, the MLB, really quickly to end this podcast, and they're just frustrating the heck out of me. And talk about social media with them, reporters come out early last week and say, oh, there's a deal in place. Tony Clark, the head of the Players Union, and Rob Manfred, the commissioner, have met. And there's a framework to a deal, and deal is expected to be signed by the weekend. Well, it's Monday, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. I just don't know. I give up on trying to figure out why they're not playing baseball. I know financially it's trying to get the players the most money, and that's fine. But the owners can give money. Like, the owners are, if you own a sports team, if you take a few $1,000,000 hit, that's not hurting you. I promise. Like, I don't have that money, but I know it's not taking a huge hit. So they just need to come together and develop a plan, because fans want baseball. And the later you go into the summer, probably the worse the coronavirus is going to get, and the lower the chances of you regaining what you used to have in the 1900s. Baseball was the sport in America. It's not anymore. It's probably not even top 3. I would give the nod. Honestly, in most cases, the NFL and NBA are much bigger than the MLB, and then college basketball and football are bigger. And it's because the MLB has lacked initiative on a lot of stuff, and right now is a prudent example of why the MLB could have had the whole summer to themselves, but they chose to go about it in a different way, and that did not happen. So this will wrap up episode 66 of the Jeff Tate Sports Podcast. Be sure to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast on wherever you get podcasts. I will see you guys Wednesday for episode 67. Be safe.